Hello, I'm Brigantia, Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Tuesday. Tuesdays are days when we discuss challenges that are specific to the pagan world. And as it's Samhain season, I wanted to talk about things that are really relevant for this particular time of year. As you're probably aware, Samhain is time for reflection. And this is really reflection about all areas of life, including our spirituality. And it got me to thinking about cultivating quality in our spiritual lives. I mean, there's a lot of different ways we could go to, seemingly do more, but when it comes to spirituality, I don't want to just get busy work and fool myself into thinking that that in and of itself means that I'm making spiritual advancement, because it's not necessarily the case. It isn't just about giving the appearance, whether it's to others or to ourselves, that, oh, we're doing all of these pagan witchy things and therefore we must be really getting somewhere, really making progress, or we're making breakthroughs of one kind or another. We're just really on top of it. When in reality, sometimes it's just busy work, it's static, distractions, noise. Sometimes we can get caught up going down our little rabbit holes because it's easier than confronting some of our most deep-rooted issues. And I've been thinking about that a lot, and one of the things we're going to be having at Blackbird's Brew later on this year has to do with doing workshops for releasing energies that are harmful to us. And then in the coming year, anyone who makes it through the workshop will probably be invited to join in some group shadow work. It will be very personal, very deep, very intense. And there'll be a lot of things that a lot of us have kept buried, or that we ignored, or have tried to deprioritize. We've been trying to outrun certain things, and I think that's something that a lot of us are struggling with. We keep trying to outrun our pain, but spirituality, one of its core functions is addressing these issues within our lives. The big stuff, the important stuff, the stuff that feels like it's almost too heavy for us to carry. It's almost too big to keep in our minds. It's something that we just can't easily see a way through. This is part of what spirituality and faith is for. It's even, really, when you think about it, this is the great work that we talk about in witchcraft. It isn't so much about mastering our spells, although of course we certainly want to become very proficient and adept magical users. It isn't just about, we've memorized our rituals and we can perform them without a hitch. Although that is important too. That has its place. It isn't just about, how much knowledge we've gleaned about various pagan topics, even though that is important, and that also has its place. But what really matters, and what is the hardest thing to break through to sometimes, is taking all of this, connecting the dots, and letting it really benefit our lives, and that being visible changes, but changes that we can see in our thought process, in our emotional and intellectual integration within ourselves, changes in our behaviors, changes in how we react to and how we relate to the rest of the world and to other people in our lives. This is the big stuff. This is the personal transformation, and it isn't something we can fake. It isn't something we can just go through the motions and get the results that we think we want. It has to be 100% genuine and committed. It is a quest for meaning. This is about traveling a spiritual road, to not just discover our purpose, but to live that purpose, to put it into action, to put it into practice. We live in such a lazy society. People love to talk about things, but how many of them actually go out and do things? And this isn't just about on the spiritual level. A lot of people talk about how they wish they were organized, or they wish they had a clean house, or they wish that things were going smoothly at home. They wish they had a peaceful atmosphere. But how many people actually put forth the effort to create that? How many people are organizing their affairs? How many people go to the effort of going and committing to a cleaning routine? How many people actually do things to make the home more cozy and to make it a more peaceful atmosphere? How many? And it's the same with relationships. People say they want a good relationship with, their spouse or their lover, or with their parents or their children or their friends or their coworkers. But how many people are actually meeting everyone else halfway and working towards creating those better relationships? There's lots of talk about empathy these days, but talk is cheap. How many people show it? It's things to think about. Have we become just a civilization of posers? And this is a very important question, and I don't mean it as an attack on anyone. I think just people in general, but especially those of us within paganism and witchcraft, I think it's important for us to address. Because the internet makes it so easy, doesn't it? Social media makes everything so easy. You can construct this beautifully curated and completely false vision for everyone else to look at. And they can't see the truth beneath because we've hidden it. We've hidden it through filters. We've hidden it through, using other people's ideas rather than talking about what we actually think. We've done it by doing, here's how to perform witchcraft on a daily basis in 5 easy steps, without actually talking about what it means, and talking about how the things that we do, just going through the motions, doesn't mean anything. Our hearts have to be into it. It's about putting forth our mental energy, learning to focus our spiritual energy, getting something more out of the effort than what the sum of its parts are. How many people in videos or in blogs or within Facebook groups or wherever else people congregate on the digital sphere, how many people are actually talking about that? Getting to the source of ourselves, the source of our power, and taking everything that we are and making it bone deep. To where, we're not just on the superficial. We're not just, vapid or empty or putting on a show or doing something because we thought it was pretty, that we're actually getting meaning out of it. It's difficult. And the other day, during a voice chat at the brew, we were talking about this kind of thing, and we were also talking about following standards in society, how that's affected different religions. There was an observation made that, used to, in the Christian churches, people were expected to put on their Sunday best, whatever that consisted of. But the idea was putting your best foot forward, presenting yourself in the most, at your best, in your most dignified fashion, in the house of your God. And I could understand that, because there is something about when you are dressing a little bit out of the ordinary, it triggers a different mindset within yourself, and in a way it actually prepares you of, I am not dealing with everyday things, I'm leaving some of that behind, and I'm refocusing on something that is higher and more eternal. It's very similar with rituals. Not everyone has ritual robes, but a lot of us at least have something that, perhaps a piece of jewelry, that we make sure that we have on ourselves, or they go through certain cleansing rituals, or meditations. There's a lot of different things that people do, and we do all of these things to create that break between our everyday lives and then really focusing in on spiritual activity. But over the course, I want to say about 5 years, I've seen less and less emphasis, at least on social media and discussion there, amongst pagans and witches about going to the effort for our rituals, going to the effort for our spell work, going to the effort for our meditations, even learning basic skills, let alone really bringing them up to a really proficient level. Not a lot of talk about that anymore. Not a lot of talk about connecting the dots. Not a lot of talk about being able to present a reasoned line of thinking for why you believe what you believe, how you think it fits into the greater whole, or connecting it to things outside of itself. Not much talk about that. And it's really very disturbing, and it has everything to do with following standards. It's not just that people aren't willing to, put on a ritual robe in order to do something. It's that people, a lot of them, aren't doing rituals at all. People will talk about spells, they'll exchange Pinterest posts of spells or ideas, but they aren't performing them. They're not actively shaping their lives. They're not taking responsibility for themselves. People talk about healing, but when it comes time to do the work, are they actually walking the road? And I include myself in this. This is something I've had to become much more consciously aware of lately. It's been made very clear to me in some of the work I've been doing is that I simply cannot go on in the status quo that I used to be in. More is required of me, and there's no way I can negotiate my way around it. I simply have to go through the process and be brave enough to see it through to the end. These are the conversations we need to be having within our pagan communities about walking the faith in a way that is real. And this isn't just about arguments about historical accuracy or what theory has more validity or what grandma taught or anything else. It isn't even about what ideas we necessarily come up with in the here and now, even though some of our ideas we come up with are actually very solid. It's about being honest. It's about realness, about, you say you believe these things. Does it show in your actions? Is your heart on display? If someone, was a fly on the wall and watching you go through your spiritual routines, could they tell that there was something different about you as opposed to anybody else, including people who don't claim to have any kind of spirituality? I think about these things. And it's easy. It's easy because of social media to not go through this effort. It's easy because of our culture and things going on in our culture to not really get beneath the surface level. Think, for example, of all of those really vapid memes that are just platitudes and bromides and regurgitated stuff that you would expect to find in pop psychology, and not even good pop psychology that has a slight veneer of paganism laid over it. You see these things make the rounds on social media all the freaking time. But do these memes actually lead anyone to developing themselves? Because think about it, the general message of a lot of these memes is essentially you are fine exactly the way you are, there's nothing wrong with you, it's the rest of the world that's at fault, and you don't actually need them anyway. And whatever you happen to think is perfectly fine and valid, and you don't have to justify it, you don't have to have any kind of logical reasoning behind it, you don't have to have any basis for it, you don't have to point to nature and say, because of this thing in nature it got me to thinking about this principle, and therefore I apply this principle in this context. You don't have to do any of that. You don't have to put forth any effort. You can just be. You can just be and simply announce that this is what you are, and it's just as good as people who've been doing the work for 30, 40 years. That is the message that's being circulated and regurgitated on social media all the time. And it isn't okay. I would like to really state very strongly here that is actively harming people's spirituality. It is not creating a welcoming environment. It's not creating an accepting environment. It's telling people that they don't have to become or do anything. So let's say someone has a really profound talent. Let's say someone really has an aptitude for divination. Well, you've just told them that they don't actually have to learn their craft. No, you don't have to hone that intuition. You don't need to learn about the tarot or scrying or the runes or any other form of divination. No. Just whatever your instincts happen to do, that's just as good as anything else. You don't have to develop. In fact, it's better if you don't. Think about what that does to people. That is hamstringing people. This isn't enabling spiritual enlightenment. This is making sure that people never spiritually progress at all. And how cruel that is. How very, very cruel. Because there are people out there who are spiritually hungry, especially after this past year. And there are some people who are quite new to the pagan realm and the witchcraft world. And they've come because they looked at the failures of more mainstream religions through, let's say, the COVID hysteria, and they didn't see churches coming together. They did not see ministers ministering. They did not find comfort in their Bibles. They did not find comfort in, what is supposed to be the Christian fellowship. They couldn't find what they needed and what should have been provided through their old faith. And now they're examining something new. And what are we giving them? I think we've got to do better. I mean, I'm trying to do that here on my channel. Those of us at Blackbird's Brew, we're all very focused on trying to make sure that what we're doing is of importance, that it's quality, and that it's something that has meaning and value. And I really hope there are others in the community who are feeling the same urge of, we've just got to do better. We can't just simply say that whatever idea is passing through your head, you can call it paganism and that's good enough. And I think one important first step in divorcing ourselves from these really detrimental patterns of just, oh, it's whatever you think, and leaving it at that and shutting down conversations, I think we need to start really beginning to define ourselves, to define our traditions. What I'm doing, for instance, in the Wicca 101 classes, I'm explaining kind of what basic generic Wicca is and what it consists of. And as time goes on, what we need, whether it's, from me, someone else at Blackbird's Brew, other people within the broader community, is to start defining individual traditions. Really talk about what is the difference between a Gardnerian Wiccan and an Alexandrian. What is the difference between someone who practices Celtic Wicca versus Hellenistic? It is okay to define the things that do make us different. It's okay to explain, while we have this base core in common, these are the different variations. And this is why it's still close enough to all fall under the Wiccan umbrella, but different enough to where it is an actual different legitimate tradition. We also need to be open and honest about what makes different traditions of witchcraft distinct from one another. What makes, and also when it comes to working with specific pantheons, what does it mean to be Norse pagan, or Celtic pagan, or Greek pagan, or Roman pagan, or any, Egyptian pagan, and let alone being Kemetic. It is okay to explain to people that these things, while interrelated, are still different. Because right now what I'm afraid new people see is that they get interested in paganism, they get interested in witchcraft or Wicca, and then they go to the community, they search online, because that's where we all think to look first nowadays, and they're looking for answers, they're looking for guidance, they're looking to see what the possibilities are. And instead of getting possibilities, instead of being presented with, these are some destinations, some amongst many, instead of getting solid information about very basic philosophical ideas, instead what they're getting is just one great big homogenized blob that just is completely covered over with memes and things that are unrelated to paganism as a whole. Just memes, here's some pretty pictures, and by the way, you're good enough, and that's all that they're getting. That's not telling them what any pagan tradition consists of. That's not telling them what's really involved if you are living this path. I mean, that's one of the favorite things that people started saying a couple of years ago of, oh, well, witchcraft is a way of life. Well, okay, I agree. But it isn't enough to simply say that. You are shutting down a conversation. You're not telling new people what that way of life actually looks like. And you don't have to say that every single witch's way of life is exactly the same. Someone who is really deep into herbology is going to have a daily practice that looks a little bit differently from someone who focuses in on crystal work. Someone who does, a lot of fire spells is going to be different from someone who is focused on watery magic. These are different things, but you can at least explain to them what it looks like for you and how that relates back to the greater whole. How you are a branch on the tree and not a tree, and that's entirely different. We can do that. I am sure we can come to do that, and I think we've absolutely got to start requiring that of ourselves, of saying that it's not enough to just be whatever. I need to think about what I am. I need to be able to define what I am, so that if someone follows after me and say, hey, what is it that you believe? What is it that you do? How has that changed your life? Be able to be in a position to give that spiritual witchling or that brand new baby pagan some answer, some perspective. And you can point out all day long the differences of individual things that are very personalized to you. But you can tell them that it's one destination amongst many. You can point them into the direction of other guidance. We can do better to minister to new people and also to ourselves. Another word that gets thrown around these days a lot is community. Community this, community that, this community, that community, whatever community. But how much of this actually involves people talking to each other? And that's why I think maybe as we go on in the future, maybe we could see an emphasis of more pagan groups, whether it's on social media platforms like Facebook or MeWe or Wimkin or whatever else, or on places like Discord, which Discord is a brilliant platform that's really set up nicely for discussions and chatting back and forth. But we need people who are actually talking with one another. And it's true, not everyone is going to fit into every other group. I mean, sometimes personalities don't match. Sometimes there's just too much a difference in the philosophy or in the theological priorities of one person versus another. But where we can make genuine connections and where we do have enough common ground to really collaborate and work together and come together for teaching and for mutual encouragement and for just general support as we all walk through this life, because there's not a single one of us in paganism or any other religion that we don't have people who lack problems in their lives. We're all struggling with something. And if we can form better support systems, not only does that help ourselves, not only does that give newcomers something to latch onto and have some kind of anchor as they're going through their own transformation, because you remember what it was like at the beginning. It was just this, like the entire world just blew up inside of your head and you're trying to take in everything at once. How much difference it does make when you have something solid to see you through that process. But we can't have this unless we talk to each other more. And that means having discussions about important things and little things and talking about how things connect together. I suppose what I'm really talking about is maybe it's time for paganism to grow up, for witchcraft, for Wicca to really grow up, and start thinking about what does it mean to be a religion and to be a spiritual path. And this puts me in the mind of how can we be of service, particularly for those of us in Wicca or for people who are involved in a form of pagan priesthood. Our job is to be of service. So I think it's worth asking ourselves during the Samhain season, are we being of service to others? As others are going through that same quest for meaning that we're on ourselves, are we providing them with something? And it's not just pointing someone in a direction, go read this book or go watch that video, or here's a ritual, enact that, and then you're good to go. Are we being teachers? Are we capable of having those deeper philosophical discussions? Are we able to help people go through a thought process as they're just trying to figure things out? When they're talking about, how can I connect with deity, do we understand that they don't just mean, how can I get a deity to pay attention to me in a meditation or in a dream? Do we understand that they're not just talking about directing prayers at a deity? Do we have information to convey about building relationships with that deity and what it means to have a God in your life on that much more of a personal level? We have some very deep reflecting to do as a community. And I'm not putting myself above anyone else here, because this is literally what I was talking with other members of the brew just a couple of evenings ago. We were all thinking about this. because we don't want to have the same failings that the churches just went through the COVID hysteria. We don't want this to be something that's just skin deep, that's just going to die out and fade away again. You know, we are the inheritors of the work of the people who brought paganism out of the closet, you know, during the 20th century, who fought legal battles to get recognition, who fought legal battles to say that, you know, yes, we have a right to exist and we have the right to practice our religion. We inherited all of their hard work, all of their commitment, all of their wisdom. It's time for our generation to step up to the plate and to fight the battles that it's intended for our generation to fight, and to lay the groundwork to leave something behind worthwhile for the next generation to inherit, whether it's our own children who we brought up as pagans, or whether it's students who've come along the way, or whether it's people who have come into contact with the work that we've done in public, whether through videos or discussions in social media, or through books that we've written, articles that we've written, whatever we have done to contribute to the public conversation within paganism. What kind of foundation are we leaving behind for other people to pick up when their time comes? This is serious stuff. And especially when you think about in the context of Samhain being a time to honor the ancestors, which is a topic in and of itself about how we can honor the ancestors, which I'll be getting to that this season, not to worry. But at some point, we will be the ancestors. Maybe we should be asking ourselves now, when we still have time, and we still have the capability of making a really beneficial contribution, are we doing anything that someone in the future should honor us for? Kind of gets the wheels turning, doesn't it? Because sooner or later, say 50 years from now, there'll be a generation of pagans who are looking back at us the way we look back on pagans from 50 years before us. What will they find? I really hope they find something more than just the political and social squabbles that have dominated so much, just so much time, so much airspace, so much mental space. Just the energy that is devoted to all this stuff. And the way people tangle up spirituality, and they don't even think about if the spirituality they claim to practice has any ideological similarity whatsoever with the politics and the social nonsense that they promote. You know, what are we leaving for them to look back on? I hope it's more. I hope it's more than what I'm seeing right now. I hope I'm doing my part. I know my sisters at Blackbird's Brew, they are very much doing their part. They work with different people all the time in different forms, but you know, we're all trying to do the work. We're all trying to live up to our charge, because that is part of what makes our spirituality a quality and a valuable thing to do. It's part of the great work that is necessary for us to engage in our own personal transformation so we can be what we were always meant to be. It's part of fulfilling our obligations to our patron deities, and it's part of just fulfilling our obligations as witches. You know, we did not invent the craft. None of us living invented the craft. We are caretakers. We are stewards of us. So I think it's worth thinking about what kind of stewardship is our generation doing. Maybe it's time to make some changes. Anyway, I would love to hear from everyone else, especially if you listen through my rambling for nearly half an hour. Thank you for tuning in. There will be a link in the description box below to join the Discord group Blackbird's Brew. That's where the conversations take place. We're always on the lookout for new members and new people to share what they know, whether it's fun stuff or it's more serious stuff like what we've been discussing. We are ready and waiting for you with open arms, so you would be very welcome if you decided to join. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Please leave a like and leave a comment if you have any thoughts on this subject, or indeed a question on anything else pagan related. It might give me an idea for a future video, and I'd be happy to I'd be happy to have more interactive experience with people who watch the videos. If you do have questions, if I'm able to address them, I would be very happy to do that either at Blackbird's Brew or in a video format here. But I think that's enough for now. I'll see you in another video. Bye.